Do you struggle against long pimples? Do you keep popping the ball up high or dumping the ball into the net? Are you a bit clueless about what's going on? Boo, long pimples! Well, in this video, I'm going to share the #1 best drill that you can do to understand how long pimples work and start beating all those players who frustrate you with their long pimples. Let's dive in. So here's some footage where I am simulating what happens to many players when they face long pimples. We see these shots where all of a sudden a player pushes and the ball pops up high and the player's not really quite sure why that's happened. And we see other instances where the player plays an attacking shot and it goes straight down into the table or the bottom of the net, and again they're not quite sure why that has happened.
Long pimples.
So how do we overcome this? How do we start to understand how to play against long pimples? Well, there is one exercise that you can do, which if you repeat it a few times, you will begin to completely understand how to play against long pimples. And the exercise simply works like this. You start with a topspin serve, aimed towards the long pimples. The long pimples player is going to chop the ball back. At this stage, the ball comes back to you with backspin. To return this, you're simply going to push the ball back. Now, the long pimples player is going to return your push also with a push. This is where things get a little confusing. You've seen the long pimples player push. Everything about that stroke tells you it should be backspin, but it's not backspin. It comes over with either no spin or even a little bit of topspin. So if you now push that ball, boing, it goes up into the air. So instead of pushing that ball, you're going to just topspin the ball over the net, playing forwards and up. Now the long pimples player is going to chop again. Chop. The ball's now coming back to you with, yes, backspin. You're going to push that ball. The long pimples player then pushes. What's the spin? Yes, either going to be a floaty ball or a slight topspin ball. So therefore, you're going to then play a topspin shot. And you can keep this basic drill going for quite a long time. Basically, you're just going to alternate between pushing and topspinning. Pushing and top spinning, and you'll soon begin to understand how the spin is changing from the long pimples bat. Now, you don't need to understand all of the physics of how the long pimples is changing the spin, right? You don't need to go to that level of detail. You just need to understand this. If you top spin and the long pimples player chops, it's going to come back to you with lots of backspin. If you push and the long pimples player pushes, the ball's going to come back to you as float or a little bit of topspin. That's all you really need to understand. When you've done this drill enough times, you'll begin to completely understand how the spin is changing, and you'll be very comfortable with the patterns of play when you're facing a long pimples player. And over time, you may not stick exactly to this push topspin combination. You may decide that once you get the backspin ball from the long pimples player, that actually you want to loop it, okay? That's absolutely fine. You may decide that you want to loop it again if the player chops back. Absolutely fine. But you know, it's an active decision, a good decision based upon your understanding of the spin. The whole purpose of the exercise is to really get to understand how the spin is changing. That will build your confidence playing against Long Pimples players. It won't seem so frustrating, and you know what? Something very interesting might happen. As you start returning all of the Long Pimples players' shots, it might be the Long Pimples player who starts to get frustrated. Now, isn't that a nice change? In your face, Long Pimples!
Ah, defeated! You've learned my tricks!